This is Lesson 4 of Writing Reports, Evaluations, and Funding Requests. This lesson focuses on writing funding applications. First, this lesson will talk about the types of funding requests. Second, the essential parts in funding requests. And third, it'll talk about tips for effectively writing these requests. There's many types of funding requests, and it's important for you to consider what type of funding you're requesting and what you have to do to apply for it. In terms of the types of funding proposals, I'm referring to material that I received from a colleague of mine, Mary Medcalf, who's field coordinator of the University of Windsor School of Social Work. She proposes that some types of funding proposals are related to community or programs. They're for program development, they're for technical assistance, they're for planning, coordination, or networking. Some funding proposals are for academic or administrative purposes. There may be grants for research or equipment or staff development. There can be also fundraising efforts for events or causes. Funding requests vary. It can be an agency memo to an administrator. It can be a letter requesting financial support from local or regional businesses or organizations. There can be activities related to press releases, community flyers, online requests such as GoFundMe accounts. There can also be formal grant applications submitted to foundations or governmental agencies, and this is primarily what this lesson is focusing on. Reports, proposals, and funding requests often have common elements in organization. They tend to include a literature review that supports the proposal's purpose or recommendations. They all start with communicating to the reader what's already been published or discovered about this particular topic area. They all follow instructions and consider the audience who's going to be reading. They attempt to engage and persuade the reader. The following proposal developmental path has been also suggested by Mary Medcalf. It's to develop and research an idea, to write a proposal outline, to select the appropriate funder, to research that funder and obtain the guidelines, to draft the proposal, to do the proofreading, to make revisions, and then submit the proposal. You'll wait until it's funded or not funded, and if it's not funded, you request reviewer comments and consider revising and resubmitting it. The essential components of a funding application include the information to include, the structure, and clearly communicating the reason you should be funded. Funding requests communicate evidence of need. Why is this project necessary? And statistics or research finding that support that. So it's not just you saying it's necessary, you can provide some evidence supporting that it's necessary. A method to meet the need, and that method is based upon research, evaluation, or an intervention method which is clearly explained. There's literature showing the effectiveness of the method. An action plan. That's okay, you're proposing a method, there's a need for it, but exactly how are you going to do the method? An action plan is a timeline of who will do what, when, for how long, all the particular issues and description about how you're going to actually accomplish the proposal. The budget is an itemized listing of expenses and explanation of expenses. It describes the funding that's requested. It will also refer to funds that may come from other sources. Funding requests further communicate a method for evaluating the effectiveness of the project You can't just say this would be a good idea and pay us in order to do it. You have to say, how are we going to show you later on that what we accomplished, what we did, actually met our goals, were actually effective. It's important to also communicate the organization's ability to carry out the project based upon the organization's history, their structure, and their staffing, the partnerships that they may have. It's important to identify partners who will work with the organization on the project, particularly if you need a number of partners in order to accomplish the program or the proposal. You need to talk about sustainability. That's how the organization will continue to provide this program or intervention or whatever, or use the project results when the funding ends. This is because funding eventually will end. The funders want to know that this is not just going to be a limited term type of thing, that it's going to have a life afterwards. Regarding the structure of funding requests, they all include a title of the project, an introduction, all the items that we've previously just talked about, and a brief conclusion summarizing the request. Letters or informal requests may also include attachments or appendices with details, since letters tend to be shorter, and you put the details in extra appendices. Formal applications often include executive summaries and formal sections with headings. It is really important to be sure that you're following the instructions from funding organizations. There are many people in practice who've had difficult experiences that have come from this. Not following all of the instructions, even small ones like margins and maximum amount of words or single spaces or whatever. If you don't follow their instructions, funding organizations often won't read your application. And then you've gone to all of that trouble for nothing. Here are some tips for writing funding applications, and they involve following all the instructions, supporting your analysis with data or evidence, including all the parts, not leaving something out, persuading the reader to fund your application. When you're editing a funding application, it's important to consider whether the application will successfully avoid the following common reasons for rejection. So they include ignoring guidelines or instructions, not submitting the application on time, having a statement that wasn't convincing, communicating a desired outcome of the project, but in an uncertain or unrealistic way. Ability to achieve the outcome was not demonstrated. The problem being addressed or the method used wasn't sufficiently explained. Sometimes you have to be careful because prominent research or literature related to the topic was not cited, and the people reading the application are familiar with that literature and wonder why you're not familiar with it. Sometimes you need support or partnerships needed for success, and they weren't mentioned or documented in your application. Additional reasons for rejection is the application was poorly written. This can refer to grammar and spelling or punctuation errors, which suggest that you're sloppy and not paying attention, and funders don't tend to like that. It also could refer to using a high level of jargon or undefined concepts which were not easily understood by the reviewer. Your budget needs to be realistic. If it's not within norms or the cost is greater than the benefits, then the project will probably not be funded. A budget that contains errors or math mistakes is also likely not to be funded. If the application uses outdated terminology or methods, again, the funder may wonder whether you really are capable of doing this project. It's important to include any coordination with existing efforts or programs related to the proposed project. For example, if your agency wants to provide a program for people with eating disorders, and there's another agency in your town that provides a program for people with eating disorders, the funder may want to know, well, have you gotten together? Is there really a need for two programs? Maybe they are focusing on one particular aspect and you want to focus on another aspect. It's important to document that. Finally, the topic may not fit under the funder's interest or priorities. You have to be sure that they're interested in funding the type of project that you're proposing. Another issue is if your request was not timely. If you submitted at the end of a budget year and they've already used up all their funds, you may wind up having something that would have had a very good chance of being accepted if it was submitted earlier in the budget year. Writing successful funding applications requires sufficient time to plan, to write, and to edit. You need to be able to research project related to research, the literature related to the topic, current actions that are going on about the topic, the organization's ability to do the project, any partnerships needed for success, and the funder's interests and requirements. You need to have time for proofreading and for editing. And you need persistence. Failed attempts provide experience for future efforts. This is the end of Lesson 4. Review the following example and then practice what you learned. Once again, the next section uses the Teen Anger Management Group as an example, only it's going to give an example of requesting funding to do this group. It illustrates the steps in this lesson and shows a way for completing the Lesson 4 writing lab. Once you have reviewed the example and reviewed what you've learned and the ideas that you wrote down for the lesson, you should go and complete the Lesson 4 writing lab.